We did not expect to see the damage that we saw when we came into the town, Ted. We approached from the west, from the Lafayette area, and as we came in over what they're calling the Bowl right now, just south of the Pontchartrain and just north of New Orleans, we were stunned by the amount of water and the widespread flooding that occurred in that area. Thousands upon thousands of homes were flooded completely up to the roof lines. It was absolutely an amazing sight. The only other helicopters in the area were Coast Guard helicopters, and we were working with them and trying to coordinate and help them with rescues by picking out and pointing out rooftops with our high-definition Cineplex camera system. So we moved into the area, and we just saw immense damage everywhere, and it was breathtaking.
Now, the most dramatic piece of video is, of course, a Coast Guard helicopter rescue that was affected and that you caught on camera. Just talk us through that for a moment. And as you're talking us through that, was this the only rescue, or were there other people on rooftops who were pulled out of there?
Well, this was the only rescue that we had seen, and we were working closely with the Coast Guard. And one of the reasons we're here is to help provide imaging for FEMA and for the Coast Guard with high-def aerial system that we have. So we were working closely with the Coast Guard, and they asked us to come over and take a look at some of the rooftops. And as we came over, we got one of their Sikorsky helicopters pulling a gentleman off the rooftop of a house. Now, it was a dynamic rescue, and they were talking us through. One of their rescue swimmers had been winched down, and the gentleman was pulled off the rooftop. And you have to imagine, Ted, that the winds in these areas were still swirling about to 30 to 40 miles per hour. So it was an extremely difficult operation for the Coast Guard, and it was done precisely, and it was very much a privilege to watch. These gentlemen are true professionals, and they rescued this gentleman under very, very adverse circumstances.
And made it look easy, I might add, as our viewers can see right now. But I'm glad you pointed out just how complicated and difficult it was under the circumstances. Fires. You saw, or at least videotaped, a couple of fairly major fires out there, and again, that sort of counterintuitive fire when everything is surrounded by water.
Yeah, that was something that we found very, very odd as well. We came into the area, and one of the first things that caught our eyes, other than the widespread flooding, was there was what looked to be a marina boathouse, or from what I'm told after the fact, is a very old and historic restaurant on the south shore of the Pontchartrain. We flew up on this, and it was fully involved in fire. And what we noticed is, in the marina around this fire, boats were tossed around like toys, and capsized and overturned and piled up. It was an absolutely breathtaking sight. And of course, no fire department personnel could access this area due to just the immense flooding. During
the course of this day, JT, we've been seeing pictures from and even some video from inside the Superdome, where a lot of people who couldn't get out of New Orleans took shelter. You gave us a unique perspective on the Superdome, though, and a sense of just how much damage the storm did. Talk us through that.
Well, we were flying into town, and my pilot and the owner of Helinet, Alan Perwin, pointed out to me that half the roof of the Superdome, the coating on the roof was torn off. And we flew around to the east side, and most of the damage was present on the southeast side of the dome. And we flew by and were amazed on how much it actually peeled away. And so we took a close look with our high-definition camera system and looked at the structural integrity of the roof and made sure that it seemed secure, and so far it looks like it held very well. And also, as we came around that orbit, we noticed that the Hyatt Hotel, which was absolutely amazing sight, there were three sides of the Hyatt Hotel. Two of the sides, both sides facing west and to the south, were basically untouched with some broken windows. But the side that was facing north was completely devastated. All the windows throughout all of the floors were completely blown out to where we could see the beds within the hotel rooms, and it's just an amazing sight in the downtown area for all that damage. But it seemed to be more constrained to the north side. Everything facing north and east seemed to have the worst damage.
What about the water level in New Orleans itself?
The actual downtown area, the major area of downtown, the concentrated area, seemed to be with the least flooding. Where we started to see some major flooding was, again, when we started working west from downtown and north towards the Pontchartrain. It got substantially worse, especially in the areas further north and west of downtown within 5 miles.
JT, you and I were talking just before we went on the air, and let me acknowledge I'm no expert on this, you're no expert on this, but we both know that New Orleans is in a bowl. It's below sea level, and the levees are supposed to keep the water out of there. All that water, much of which is now reaching up to the rooftops of some of these buildings, how are they going to get that out of there?
Well, yeah, we've noticed that as well, Ted, in being below sea level, and what we were heard coming in, and all the news reports that we were hearing coming in, is that bowl being below sea level, and that southerly flow on the west side of the hurricane, pouring that storm surge out of the Pontchartrain into the bowl, absolutely came true.
Well, thank you for your video. Thank you for your help. That's J.T. Alpaugh, who is now in Baton Rouge tonight. Like these, this is the face of the federal government. Mike Brown, who is the director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, did I get it right? More commonly known as FEMA. And your problem is to help people who have even bigger problems than you do. And tonight, that is a daunting task, isn't it?
That's right, Ted. Not only to help individuals, but frankly, what we see in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and I'm afraid we're going to see all the way up through the Tennessee and Ohio Valley, is to help state and local governments begin to rebuild also. I mean, you've seen and heard the reports of the widespread devastation in the floods. We not only have to help those individuals, those families who have lost their homes, but also schools and hospitals and public buildings that need to be replaced too.
Mr. Brown, we've just been looking at some aerial footage of an area just to the north and east of downtown New Orleans, but still in that bowl that is New Orleans. And you've got water up to the rooftops. And quite literally, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that thousands of homes are underwater up to the second story. Just tell me, I believe the only way to get that water out of I mean, you can't wait for it to drain away. You're below sea level. You got to pump it out, right?
Well, that's correct. And a few years ago, I decided that FEMA really needed to do some catastrophic disaster planning. And so the president gave us some money to do that. And the first place we did a study was in New Orleans. And as you know, you've probably heard everyone talk about the bowl. Well, what happened is, Max Mayfield at the National Hurricane Center was right. We had a huge storm surge that came across those levees. I'm not sure we've had breaches, but we certainly had some areas where there's some leaks and some flooding continuing to occur. That water all gets in. We now have to rely upon the pumps. We need generators to do that pumping because the power was out. And some of those pumps may or may not fail. So it's going to be a long, tedious process to now get that water back out so we can then even start rebuilding homes, let alone let people back into them.
I don't want to just stress the gloomy side of this, but I mean to talk about pumping all of that water out there with generator-powered pumps, we're talking about hundreds of millions of gallons of water.
That's correct, and that's why we have the Army Corps of Engineers right here with us as part of our team that comes to these kinds of disasters. And I know that the General's going to put every kind of expert he has on this to figure out ways to expedite that and improve that, because we first have to get rid of the water before we can really start doing anything to the infrastructure.
What we have seen in that New Orleans region tonight, is that duplicated in Mississippi and Alabama, or did they get off easier?
No, and in fact what happened, believe it or not, I think New Orleans is the one that got off easy because Katrina moved to the east 30 or 45 miles, and that prevented what we would have seen had it hit the bullseye, and that is widespread flooding, breaches of all of the levees, and you would have seen downtown inundated also.
In terms of just the scope of the damage and the amount of money that will be needed to help get people back to at least a basic, decent form of living. I know it's too early to talk about it, but how does it compare to other hurricanes in years past? I guess that's the only scale we've got.
Well, this is the big one. I think it's going to be larger than perhaps larger than last year's 4 hurricanes that hit Florida. We're still in Florida. We'll be in Florida for many years. My suspicion is we're going to be in Louisiana and Mississippi and perhaps Alabama for many years also.
Well, Mike Brown, you have our prayers and our good wishes, because Lord knows you have a Herculean task ahead of you, and I thank you for taking time out to talk with us this evening.
Thank you, Ted.
So while it is true to say that New Orleans was spared the worst possible scenario, that will be scant consolation to the tens of thousands of families who've lost their homes. The impact of this storm has been brutal in New Orleans and in other cities along the Gulf Coast.